Why was the means test so unpopular? The government introduced the means test in 1931. This was a test to check whether you were eligible or how much you were eligible to receive in what was called dole. Okay, you would receive dole after 6 months of unemployment. So after 6 months of unemployment, you would go on to something called the dole after 6 months. But to receive the full amount of dole, you would have to go through what was called a means test, where the government would test you to see how much savings, but also how many possessions you had. And the people who would do that were called the PACs. The PACs. PACs. This was the Public Assistance Committees. And the Public Assistance Committees would do a number of things to check whether somebody had a right to earn. For example, they might check who in the family had any other sources of income. So checks included sources of income. That could be a part-time job for one member of the family. So if there were, for example, two or three brothers and one of them had a part-time job, that could result in a reduction in dole for the other members of the family. If there was a pension of an elderly relative within the household. So, for example, if you were living with your granddad and he was receiving a state pension, then the dole could actually be reduced for other people in the household. That would be a negative thing for you. Now, the minimum and maximum payment would vary from area to area, but the average maximum for a family of two adults and three children was fixed at about £1.46. So, average for family was £1.46, and if you imagine, the average wage at that time was £3. So it's way below what was the average wage anyway. And a lot of people didn't like this. So the question is, why was it so unpopular for so many people after 1931? And in fact, it did cause several marches in the autumn of 1931. And actually, in Rochdale and Belfast, where two of these demonstrations happened, a couple of people were actually killed in the clashes. So this is how strongly people felt about how wrong this system was in the state that the British economy was actually in. So again, some people claimed it was about the government saving money. So that it wasn't actually about helping the unemployed. It was and making things fair, which is what the government argued. A lot of people felt that it was just about money saving. So it got criticised in that way. People didn't like the inspectors coming to their homes, looking at what they owned, delving into their accounts, looking at who in the family was working or earning what. People found that very intrusive and also very judgmental. So people despised that and people didn't like it. People also did not like, I'll just add people in there, but people also did not like having to make their relatives go and live somewhere else. So in the example that we gave earlier about the pension of the relative living in the property, to gain the maximum amount in the means test, they'd have to move out. And obviously that was really awful for a lot of people because they're trying to look after perhaps elderly relatives. And just for the sake of the means test, they're actually forcing them to move away. So if we add in here, relatives have to move out of homes, people have to move around. to be able to maximise what they can earn. People just found it generally humiliating. If you had to claim the means test, then it really was a humiliation for a lot of people to have everything that you owned valued. Obviously, based on the test, they could technically stop the dole altogether. Which could in the end lead to starvation and such like. It was a real strain on family life because everything hinged on how much you were actually going to get in this test. And as I mentioned, there were marches, there were demonstrations against it, but it did carry on. Very famously, to finish off, there was a passage from George Orwell's book, The Road to Wigan Pier, where he said the following: "The means test breaks up families. An old age pensioner would usually live with one of his children. Under the means test, he counts as a lodger and his children's dole will be cut."